Michael blocked the entrance of my empty house with a shark-like grin and a strange couple standing behind him. Mother-in-law. We already signed. This is sold and you are coming to live in the guest room. I am Emily, 72 years old, former director of the City Records Department. He does not know that my house is legally untouchable. The taxi was pulling away down the cobblestone street, taking with it the peace I had managed to accumulate during 20 days of cruising through the Caribbean. The afternoon sun hit the facade of my brownstone, that ancient structure with high ceilings and wooden bay windows that my late husband Robert and I had restored with the sweat of our brows 40 years ago. I stepped out of the car feeling renewed with tanned skin and a wide-brimmed hat that made me feel elegant, a sensation that at my age sometimes escapes us between the bone aches and the condescending looks of young people. But that elegance transformed into a glacial cold in my stomach as soon as I set foot on the sidewalk. The main door, that beautiful piece of carved oak that I always kept double-locked, was wide open, and there he was. Michael, my son-in-law, the man who married my only daughter Sarah 15 years ago, a guy of the sort who always wears expensive cologne but never has money to pay the restaurant bill. Emily, welcome. He shouted, opening his arms as if he were the owner of the circus. You arrived just in time for the toast. I stood paralyzed, clutching the handle of my rolling suitcase. Behind him, in the foyer that used to welcome me with the scent of wood wax and fresh flowers, there was nothing, absolutely nothing. My Louis XV console where I left my keys had disappeared. The gold-framed mirror that had belonged to my grandmother was no longer there. Only rectangular marks remained on the wall paint, like ghosts of a life someone had decided to erase. What does this mean, Michael? I asked. My voice came out calmer than I felt. Inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. It means a solution, mother-in-law. It solves all your problems, he said, taking a step forward and placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. I shook off his touch with a dry movement. Look, let me introduce you to the Millers. They are the new owners. Charming people. They paid cash, an opportunity we could not let pass. A young couple in their 30s peeked timidly from behind the bulk of my son-in-law. The girl looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. The boy held a glass of cheap champagne in his hand. Nice to meet you, ma'am, Mrs. Emily, the young man stammered. We were told that you were well, that you had already moved to the assisted living facility. Assisted living, I repeated, feeling the blood rising to my face, hot and stinging. I entered the house, bypassing Michael, pushing him with my shoulder. The sound of my heels resonated with a hollow, terrible echo. I walked toward the living room, empty. My green velvet armchairs, my porcelain collection, the books, my books, centuries of history, first editions that I had rescued and cared for with the care of an archivist. Everything had vanished. The tiled floor was dirty, marked by the footprints of moving boots. Where are my things? I spun on my heels to face Michael, who had entered behind me with that smile that not even acid could erase. Everything is in a storage unit. Emily, calm down. Well, what was useful? The rest, old stuff, accumulated trash. We sold it or donated it, he said with a lightness that turned my stomach. Sarah and I talked about it while you were on the boat. We did not want to ruin your vacation with technical details. You are elderly. This house is a monster for you alone. It is falling apart. It is a danger. Sarah, I asked, looking for my daughter with my gaze, although I knew I would not find her. Sarah was always weak of character, moldable like clay in the hands of this ambitious man. She is at the house preparing your room. You are going to be fine with us, mother-in-law. We fixed up the room downstairs, the one next to the garage, so you do not have to climb stairs. With the money from the sale, we expanded the business, and you have your old age secured. We all win. The injustice hit me, not like a wave, but like a tsunami. It was not just the theft of my furniture. It was the theft of my dignity. They had taken advantage of my 20 days of absence, my first break in years, to dismantle my entire life. They had treated me like an old piece of junk that is moved from one side to another without consulting it. Old stuff, he had said. Accumulated trash. He was referring to my life, to the memories of Robert, to the heritage I built working 40 years, classifying historical government documents, where I learned that a misplaced paper can bring down a ministry. I felt a pang of pain in my chest, but it was not a heart attack. It was anger. Pure, distilled, aged anger. Michael looked at me, expecting to see the helpless old woman, the widow who cries and thanks someone for taking charge of her. He expected to see the little granny who signs whatever they put in front of her because she does not understand these modern things. "You sold the house?" I asked softly, looking down at my purse. "That is right, deeded and everything. I have a power of attorney that you signed years ago, remember? That one for medical emergencies. Well, the notary friend of mine said it worked for this too." Michael winked at the couple of buyers who now seemed very uncomfortable. "Do not worry about the legal details, mother-in-law. It is done." The moving truck took the last of it this morning. I closed my eyes for a second. I breathed in the smell of dust and betrayal. I remembered the day I retired. My colleagues gave me a gold fountain pen. They told me, "Emily, you are the only person who knows where all the secrets of this city are buried." They were not referring to bodies, but to files, to clauses, to fine print. I am not a helpless little old lady. I am a woman who organized the administrative chaos of 3 governors. I am a woman who knows how to read, and above all, I am a woman who never, ever leaves loose ends. I opened my eyes. The sadness evaporated, giving way to absolute mental clarity. Michael had committed the classic error of the mediocre estimating those with gray hair. He believed that the power of attorney I gave him for medical decisions in case of incapacity gave him power over my real estate. But beyond that, he ignored the very nature of this property. "You say you sold everything," I murmured, opening my handbag. "Everything, everything. Key in hand." Michael rubbed his hands together. "The Millers move in tomorrow. You are coming right now. The car is outside." "No, Michael," I said, and my voice resonated with the authority I used to silence interns in the library. "I am not going anywhere. And Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I regret to inform you, have been scammed." The young buyer frowned. "What do you mean?" I took out my cell phone. It was not an old model with big keys. It was a latest generation smartphone that I used to manage my investments and read international news. I dialed a number I knew by heart. I did not need to search in the contacts. "Who are you calling Emily?" "Stop the drama," Michael huffed, losing the smile a little. "Do not start with your crazy things." The phone rang twice. "Mr. Henderson, this is Emily Clark. Yes, I just arrived. I need you to come to my home immediately. Bring the police and the Incorporation Act number 4058. Yes, it seems we have a case of flagrant fraud, breaking and entering, and qualified theft. Oh, and lawyer, bring the Historical Heritage Trust document, too." I hung up and looked at Michael. His face had gone from the reddish color of smugness to a sickly pale. "What trust?" he asked with a voice a little higher pitched. I laughed softly. It was a dry laugh without joy but full of power. "Oh, Michael, you are so basic." I walked toward the center of the empty living room, occupying the space as if it were still full of my furniture. "You think this house is mine. You think you could sell it using an expired medical power of attorney and a corrupt notary. But this house does not belong to me, nor does it belong to you, nor to Sarah." I turned to the couple who watched the scene with eyes like saucers. Young people. "I am very sorry that you paid money to this scammer. I hope you can recover it, although I doubt it because Michael tends to spend what he does not have. But you see?" I paused dramatically, enjoying the tense silence that had formed. 10 years ago, I donated the bare ownership of this land and the structure to the City Historical Archives Foundation, reserving only the lifetime usufruct for myself. This house is legally a private state museum while I live. The silence was absolute. You could hear the buzzing of a fly hitting the window glass. That is a lie, Michael hissed. I saw the deeds in your safe. They were in your name. You saw the simple copies from 1980, Michael. A good archivist never leaves the originals within reach of the ignorant. I smiled at him this time with true satisfaction. Nobody can sell this house. Nobody, and much less you. The sound of sirens began to be heard in the distance, approaching from the main avenue. Michael looked toward the door, then toward me, and for the first time in 15 years, I saw real fear in his eyes. I told you that you were coming to live with us. He growled, trying to regain control, advancing toward me with clenched fists. You are not going to ruin this for me, you old witch. I already spent the advance. I did not back down. I stood firm with my chin up, supported on my heels, and on 40 years of iron discipline. No, Michael, you have not understood anything. I am not going to live in your garage. You are going to go to jail and prepare yourself because I am just getting started. The sound of the patrol cars stopped right in front of the house. The red and blue lights danced over the bare walls of my living room, illuminating my son-in-law's decomposed face. I took a deep breath, feeling how the adrenaline wiped away the travel fatigue. They had emptied my house, yes, but they had filled my war tank. I adjusted my hat, crossed my arms, and waited for justice to walk through the door. The silence that remained in the house after the police left was heavier than any of the antique furniture they had stolen from me. The blue lights of the patrols stopped spinning on my walls, and Mr. Henderson, my lifelong lawyer and faithful friend, said goodbye with the promise of having the formal lawsuit ready, first thing in the morning. The Millers, the couple of buyers, had left furious, threatening to sue Michael for even the air he breathed. And Michael. Well, they had taken him to the precinct to declare, although I knew that with the judicial system we have, he would probably be free in a few hours while the file was being built. I stood alone in the middle of the living room. My living room. That space that for 40 years had harbored laughter arguments, Christmases and wakes, was now an empty resonance box. The echo of my own steps seemed strange to me, almost aggressive. I walked slowly, tracing with my fingertips the dust marks on the walls where the paintings used to hang. They had taken even the nails. I did not feel fear. What I felt was a clinical coldness, that same one that invaded me when I had to reorganize an entire section of the General Archive because someone had misplaced vital documents. My mind trained for order, and classification began to scan the void, not as a tragedy, but as a crime scene that needed to be decoded. I went to the kitchen. Luckily, the built-in appliances were still there. I guess Michael was too lazy to unscrew them. I opened the fridge, empty, turned off, and smelling of rancid humidity. I sighed. My first night back from the Caribbean paradise, and my dinner would be air, but hunger was the least of it. I needed to assess the real damage, not the furniture. That is wood and cloth things that are replaced. I needed to know how much damage they had done to my security structure. I went up the stairs to my office on the second floor. My knees protested a little, reminding me that 72 years are not in vain, but adrenaline worked better than any ointment. The office was desolate. My mahogany desk, where I wrote my memoirs and classified the history of the city, was not there. My shelves empty. Lying on the floor were loose papers, clips, and little trash they did not consider valuable. I bent down with difficulty and picked up a crumpled paper. It was an overdue electricity bill. Michael had not even had the decency to pay the utilities with the money he surely got out of my daughter, because that was the true wound, the one that bled inside. Sarah, my girl, the woman I raised to be independent, now turned into an accomplice of a looting of her own mother. But there was no time for sentimental tears. Tears blur the ink, and I needed clarity. I headed toward the corner of the room just where the wooden floor made an L shape with the window baseboard. Michael was a man of surfaces. He cared about what was seen, the appearance, the shine. He never went deep, that is why he was never a good merchant and always bankrupted his businesses. I, on the other hand, am a woman of depths. I knelt and pressed hard on the third floorboard, counting from the wall. A soft mechanical click responded to my touch. It was an antique spring system that Robert had installed decades ago, long before digital safes existed. I lifted the board. There it was, my true archive. Michael had taken the safe from the wall, the one behind the fake painting, like in bad movies. Poor delusional fool. In that safe, I only kept old notarized copies, a little cash for minor emergencies, and costume jewelry I used daily. The important stuff, what defines who Emily Clark is, was here under my feet, wrapped in hermetic plastic and manila envelopes. I took out the first envelope, the original property titles with the wax seals that are no longer used, the incorporation act of the trust I had mentioned to the lawyer, that one that shielded the house as historical heritage. But there was more. I took out a black leather notebook small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. I opened it. My eyes scanned the columns of numbers and notes written in my tight and meticulous handwriting. During the last 5 years, every time Michael asked me for a loan for a business that would surely fail, I gave it to him. But not out of blind generosity. I did it to document every penny, every transfer. Every time Sarah came crying because they did not have money for the grandkids' tuition, I paid the school directly and kept the receipt. I had a forensic record of his financial incompetence. And something more important, I had written down the account numbers that Michael thought were secret. 2 years ago at a Christmas dinner, he left his phone unlocked on the table while he went to the bathroom. 3 minutes were enough for me. Photographic memory, some call it. I call it professional training. "Oh, Michael," I murmured in the gloom of the empty room, caressing the notebook. "You think that because I use bifocals and walk slowly, I do not see what you do. You think old age is synonymous with stupidity." I took out my modern cell phone from my pocket. The screen illuminated my face. I entered my banking app. My main investments were intact, thank God, and my paranoid distrust, which led me to put biometric locks on everything. Michael had not been able to touch my liquid capital. He had only sold my things and had tried to sell the house. The damage was material, yes, but my core of financial power was still alive. I sat on the floor with my back resting on the bare wall. I closed my eyes and let reality wash over me. How did we get to this? That is the question mothers always ask ourselves when children betray us. I remembered Sarah as a child with her braids and her scraped knees. She was always fearful. She looked for my hand for everything. Maybe I protected her too much. Maybe my strength, my character as a director commanding 50 employees, scared her instead of inspiring her. And she looked for a man who, although useless, promised to take care of everything, even if in the end it was me who paid the broken plates. Society tells us older women that we are done, that our time to be protagonists is over. They tell us rest, Grandma, let the young people take charge. And we, out of tiredness or love, surrender the helm. We let them treat us like old furniture, valuable sentimentally, but cumbersome in practice. We become invisible. They speak louder to us as if we were deaf, and they explain simple things to us as if we were dumb. Michael had counted on that. He counted on my shame. He thought that seeing myself without a house and without furniture, I would feel so humiliated and vulnerable that I would accept his solution of the guest room just to not make a scandal. He thought fear of loneliness would make me docile, but he forgot a fundamental detail. I classified the archives of the dictatorship. I saw how men more powerful than him fell for a simple paperwork error. I know that power is not in shouting, nor in brute force, but in information, in knowing where the skeletons are. The phone vibrated in my hand, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Sarah. I hesitated a second. My finger hovered over the red reject button. But no, I needed to measure the enemy's temperature. I slid my finger toward the green and put it on speaker. "Mom." Her voice sounded trembling liquid, as if she had been crying for hours. "Mom, please tell me you are okay. Michael called me from the precinct. He is furious. He says you set a trap for him." "Hello, daughter," I said. My voice came out calm without a hint of the storm I carried inside. "I am not in any trap. I am in my house. Mom, you have to understand." She sobbed. We had no other option. The debts were drowning us. They were going to take our car. The business. Michael said you did not need so much space, that you would be better with us. Cared for. We did it for you, Mom. I swear. For me. I asked, feeling a metallic taste in my mouth. "Selling my bed? My books? Your father's memories? Was it for me? Or was it because your husband is a loser who does not know how to work and you do not have the courage to leave him?" There was a silence on the other end of the line, a thick and guilty silence. "Do not talk about him like that," she whispered, but without conviction. "He just wanted to solve things. Mom, withdraw the complaint. Please. If Michael has a record, he will not be able to ask for the loan we need to pay back the money to the Millers. It is going to be a terrible mess. The mess is already made, Sarah, and I did not make it. Mom, for God's sake." Her voice rose in pitch hysterical. "He is your family. Are you going to put my husband in jail? Are you going to leave your grandkids without a father? You are being selfish. You have always been like this. Cold, calculating. You only care about your papers and your rules." There it was, the external perception, the cold mother. They did not see the sacrifices, the overtime to pay for their vacations, the prudent silence before their mistakes. They only saw the authority that prevented them from doing their will. Sarah listened to me well. I stood up, dusting off my skirt. "You are right about one thing. I care about my rules, and rule number 1 of this family that your father and I established is that one does not steal. Michael did not sell my house to take care of me. He sold it to save himself. And you helped him. Mom, do not come today. I do not want to see you. Stay with him. Console him when he gets out, if he gets out today. But tell him one thing from me. The trust is not the only thing I have. Tell him to check his accounts in the Cayman Islands, those he opened last year for the kids' future." I heard a gasp on the other end. "What are you talking about? Michael does not have accounts in—" "Tell him, Sarah. Tell him the old witch knows how to count. Good night." I cut the call. My heart beat a little faster, but not from anguish, but from the satisfaction of having dropped the first bomb. Michael had been diverting money from the family business to a cheap offshore account, thinking no one would notice. I had noticed 6 months ago, reviewing discrepancies in account statements that arrived at my email by mistake or by destiny, since he used my old address as a fiscal reference to prevent Sarah from seeing them at her house. I got up and walked to the window. The street was quiet now. The moon illuminated the cobblestones. I had a plan that was forming in my head like a puzzle that puts itself together. First, logistical recovery. I could not sleep on the floor. Second, financial attack. I would block any movement Michael tried to make. Third, and most important, the moral lesson. Recovering my furniture was secondary. What I was going to recover was my position. I was going to prove to everyone, to my son-in-law, to my daughter, to the gossipy neighbors, and to society entirely, that an older woman is not residue, she is a resource, and a very dangerous one if provoked. I opened the black notebook again under the moonlight. On the last page I had written down a phone number I had not used in years. Vince, an old acquaintance from the archive, a man who dedicated himself to difficult recoveries, people who knew how to find things that had fallen off a truck. If my furniture was in a storage unit, as Michael said, Vince would know in which one before dawn. But first, I needed a chair. I went down to the backyard. There in the tool shed, I found my old folding canvas chair, the one Robert used for fishing. It was full of cobwebs, but whole. I took it to the empty living room. I opened it right in the center, in front of the main window. I sat down, crossed my legs. I took out a chocolate bar I had in my travel bag, my emergency dinner, and took a bite calmly. The house was empty, yes, but it felt more mine than ever. They had removed the ornaments, the distractions. Now only the strong walls, and I remained. I looked at my cell phone screen and dialed Vince's number. Yeah. A hoarse voice answered on the third ring. Good evening, Vince. This is Emily Clark. Mrs. Emily. The voice changed. It became respectful, almost fearful. What a miracle. I thought you had already retired from everything. From work, yes, Vince. From life, no. I need your services, and I need it tonight. You say the word boss. I want to know where the moving truck swift transport that left my house this morning is. And I want to know who is the notary who signed a fake deed in the name of Michael Davis. That is easy, ma'am. Anything else? Yes. I smiled in the darkness, a smile that did not reach my eyes. Get me a trusted locksmith. I am going to change all the locks. And Vince, I want you to find out exactly how much my son-in-law owes to the loan sharks in the South Side. I know he owes. I just want the exact figure. Consider it done. I will call you in an hour. I hung up. The hunger was gone. The tiredness had transformed into a cold and calculating energy. Michael had lit the fuse, but he did not know he was standing on a barrel of gunpowder. Tomorrow, when the sun rose, the sweet grandma would have disappeared. In her place, they would meet the ex-director of city records. And I never, ever leave a file without closing it. I settled into the fishing chair in the middle of my empty palace and waited for the call. The night was just beginning, and I had a lot of work to do. The first light of dawn entered through the bare windows of the living room, painting orange the dust marks on the floor where my Persian rugs used to rest. I had slept barely 3 hours in the folding fishing chair covered with a shawl I took from my suitcase, but strangely, my body did not hurt. On the contrary, I felt that alert stiffness that precedes great battles. I got up, stretched, listening to the creaking of my vertebrae, and went straight to the kitchen. I made instant coffee in a mug I found forgotten in the back of a cupboard. The taste was metallic and bitter perfect to wake up the senses. At 7 o'clock sharp the doorbell rang in the empty house. It was not Michael. It was the locksmith Vince had recommended, a short man of few words and hands full of grease who worked with the efficiency of a surgeon. All the locks, ma'am? He asked, looking with curiosity at the echo of the empty house. All of them master, and put double security deadbolts on the back doors. I want this house to be a bunker before noon. While he worked, I dedicated myself to sweeping. I swept with an old broom I found on the patio. I swept the dust, the dirt, and the bad energies. Every stroke was a declaration of ownership. I did not need my furniture to be the owner of my castle. The empty space gave me clarity. It allowed me to see the angles, the corners, the strategies without visual clutter. Michael thought that by taking my things, he took my identity, but he had only taken the dead weight. Now I was light. Now I was dangerous. At 9 in the morning, when the locksmith was adjusting the last screw of the front door, I heard the engine of Michael's car brake abruptly outside. The sound of his door slamming was violent. I smiled to myself, paid the locksmith, and signaled him to leave through the side garden door. I smoothed my blouse, fixed my hair in front of a glass reflection, and waited. I heard the metallic sound of his key entering the lock. It turned. It jammed. It turned again with more force. Nothing. What the hell? I heard his muffled voice through the oak wood. He tried again, shaking the handle with desperation, then blows, dry and furious punches. Emily, I know you are in there. Open the damn door, Michael shouted. There was no trace of the dear mother-in-law from yesterday. I walked slowly toward the door, but I did not open it. I stayed standing on the other side, feeling the vibration of his blows on the wood, separated from his violence by barely 2 inches of oak and a new hardened steel deadbolt. The key you have no longer works, Michael, I said with a calm voice, projecting it enough so he could hear me without needing to shout. Just like your authority in this house. This is illegal, he bellowed. Sarah also lives here. I have the right to enter for my things. Your things, Michael. You took them out yesterday along with mine. Or did you already forget? You said yourself everything was sold. In this house there is nothing of yours left, not even your dignity." There was a silence on the other side, followed by murmurs. Sarah was with him. My heart did a little flip, a spasm of maternal pain that I repressed immediately. I could not afford weaknesses now. Mom Sarah's voice filtered through the door, trembling and pleading. "Please open. We have to talk. The Millers are furious. They want their money back today, or they are going to report us for fraud. Michael had to get out on bail. It cost us our savings. Mom, please help us solve this." I approached the peephole. I saw them deformed by the lens. Michael was red sweating with his tie undone. Sarah had puffy eyes and was hugging herself. They looked pathetic. They looked defeated. But I knew from 40 years of classifying lies in official documents that defeat is not the same as repentance. They did not regret what they did to me. They regretted that it had gone wrong. "The solution is very simple. Daughter," I answered without opening. "Have Michael return the money they paid him." "I already spent part of it," shouted Michael, losing patience again. "I paid debts. I do not have the total. You have to sign Emily. You have to validate the sale or let us mortgage the house. If I do not return that money today, I am going to go to jail for real." There was the confession, the urgency, the fear. "That is not my problem, Michael. It is a basic math lesson. You do not spend what is not yours. Now leave. I am going out to run errands, and if you are here when I open the door, I will call the patrol for harassment. And believe me, with your current legal situation, you do not want the police to come again." I heard a kick against the door, a curse, and then dragging steps moving away. I waited 5 minutes, looked out the window, and saw his car turn the corner. I left the house impeccable. I was wearing my best beige linen suit, my dark glasses, and the handbag with the black notebook and the cell phone. I looked like a woman going to brunch with friends, not a woman who had just lost all her furniture. I walked to the avenue and took a taxi. "To the National Bank, please," I told the driver. My first stop was strategic. As a former official, I had known the branch manager for years. He received me with coffee and cookies, surprised to see me so soon after my trip. "Mrs. Emily, what a pleasure. How can we serve you?" "I am here to restructure my account, sir," I said, taking out my credit cards. "I want to cancel the extensions in the name of Sarah Davis immediately, and I want to block any attempt to access my investment accounts with the old power of attorney. Here I bring the revocation my lawyer drafted last night." The manager typed fast on his computer. "Done. The cards will be invalid at this moment. Anything else?" "Yes. I want a detailed account statement of the movements of the last 20 days. Michael mentioned he paid debts. I want to know if he tried to use my name to endorse anything." While the manager printed the papers, my cell phone vibrated with a message from Vince. It was a photo and an address. The photo showed a sheet metal warehouse in the industrial zone, and at the entrance parked the Swift transport truck. Under the message, a line of text. "Here is everything, boss. The watchman says they unloaded yesterday the hard way. Apparently the warehouse owner is your son-in-law's buddy." I felt a cold relief. My things existed. They had not been burned or sold for parts yet. They were kidnapped in a purgatory of dust and grease, but they were together. I left the bank feeling more powerful. I was no longer the victim who reacts. I was the player moving the pieces. Michael was running in circles trying to plug holes while I was turning off the main valves. Without the emergency credit card Sarah used and Michael squeezed his daily liquidity would run out in hours. I headed to the address Vince gave me. I was not going to enter, I just wanted to see. The taxi left me a block away. I walked under the midday sun, the heat rising from the asphalt. I stopped in front of the warehouse fence. Through the links, I saw my armchairs. They were stacked poorly near the entrance of the open warehouse, exposed to the dust. My Louis XV console had a cardboard box on top. The indignation burned my throat, but I used it as fuel. I took several photos with my cell phone. Zoom to the truck plate, zoom to my furniture, zoom to the lock on the fence. Back home, my phone kept ringing. Sarah, Michael. Unknown numbers, probably creditors or the Millers. I put it on silent. Silence is torture for desperate people. It makes them imagine the worst scenarios. I arrived at my house at 2 in the afternoon. I was hungry, so I bought a sandwich at the corner store and sat to eat it in my fishing chair in the middle of the empty living room. I was chewing the last bite when I saw a shadow project on the floor through the window. Michael had returned, but this time he did not knock. I peeked discreetly. He was sitting on the curb, head in hands. Sarah was standing next to him, talking on the phone, gesturing nervously. They looked like castaways. I decided it was time to tighten the screw. I opened the front door. The sound of the deadbolt made both jump. Michael stood up in a leap with a mixture of hope and rage on his face. "Did you come to your senses?" he asked, trying to regain his arrogant tone, although his voice trembled. "The Millers gave me until tomorrow. We need to go to the notary to fix the usufruct thing. If you sign that you renounce the usufruct, we can sell and—" "Shut up, Michael," I said softly. It was not a scream, it was an order. I advanced a step onto the porch. The sun hit my face, but I did not blink. I am not going to sign anything. I am not going to renounce anything, and I am not going to save you. "Then I go down," he shouted, desperate, approaching dangerously. "And if I go down, your daughter goes down. Your grandkids go down. Is that what you want? Do you want to see your family on the street?" Sarah started crying, a high-pitched and desperate cry. "Mom, please, he owes money to very bad people. They said if he does not pay, they are going to hurt him." I looked at my daughter. I wanted to hug her, tell her everything would be okay. But hugging her now would be condemning her to continue being the victim of this parasite for the rest of her life. Sometimes a mother's love has to be a scalpel that cuts the rotten flesh to save the patient. "Bad people?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Are you referring to Butch Malone?" Michael froze. His color went from red to ash gray in a second. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. How do you know that name?" he stammered finally. I took out my small black notebook from my pocket. I opened it calmly, looking for the page marked with a red divider. "I know many things, Michael. I know you asked him for $50,000 6 months ago for a cell phone import business that never existed. I know the interest is eating you alive, and that is why you sold my house at a fire sale price, because you needed quick cash." Michael took a step back as if I had pointed a gun at him. "Are you crazy? That is not true. And I also know," I continued reading my notes, "that you diverted $20,000 from the kids' savings account to an account in the Cayman Islands under a shell company called RM Investments." RM? Michael Davis. What little imagination you have even for crime. Sarah stopped crying and looked at her husband with eyes wide open. "What? You took the money for the kids' college?" Michael looked from side to side, cornered. The facade of a successful businessman crumbled, revealing the mediocre scammer he always was. "She is lying, Sarah. She is a senile old woman inventing things. I have the transfer numbers, Michael," I said, closing the notebook with a dry snap. "And I have something else. I know where my furniture is in your buddy's warehouse in the industrial zone." I approached the porch railing, looking down at him. "So this is what is going to happen. You have 24 hours for my furniture to appear in this living room in the same condition it left. If there is a single scratch on my Louis XV console, I will hand this notebook to the prosecutor handling your fraud case. And believe me, real estate fraud is a minor crime compared to international tax evasion and money laundering suggested by these accounts. You cannot do that to me. I am the father of your grandkids," he whispered with a broken voice. "Exactly, you are the father of my grandkids. That is why I am giving you a chance not to rot in jail for 10 years, but only a couple if you behave well. Bring my things. Return the money to the Millers with whatever you have hidden, and get out of my sight." Michael looked at me with pure hate. It was the look of a trapped animal realizing the prey is actually the hunter. He clenched his fists, looked at Sarah, who watched him with horror, and then spat on the ground. "You are going to regret this, Emily. You think you won, but you do not know who you are messing with. Butch does not forgive. Neither do I, Michael. Neither do I. I turned around and entered the house, locking the door with the double key. I leaned against the wood, feeling my legs tremble for the first time that day. Not from fear of him, but from the adrenaline of having dropped the bomb. I had revealed my cards. Now he knew that I knew everything. I slid down until I sat on the floor of the empty foyer. The silence returned to the house, but now it was different. It was no longer a silence of absence. It was a silence of waiting. My cell phone vibrated again. It was an unknown message. They say in the neighborhood the archivist lady has a good memory. Careful sometimes, remembering too much is bad for your health. I looked at the screen and smiled. Michael had already gone with the gossip to his lenders, trying to scare me. Poor idiot. He did not know I had kept secrets of people who made his loan sharks look like preschoolers. I got up, shook my skirt, and went to the kitchen to make myself another coffee. The war had stopped being cold. Now we were in open combat, and I had 40 years of archives backing me up. No one knows what an older woman is capable of until they try to wipe her off the map. Now they were going to learn that indelible ink never comes off. Now night fell over my house like a heavy, suffocating blanket. I did not turn on the lights. Why if I had no lamps? Darkness was my ally. It allowed me to see out without being seen. I kept sitting in my fishing chair back straight despite the tiredness biting my bones, watching the street through the cracks of the bare blind. My cell phone rested in my lap, glowing intermittently with messages from Sarah that I did not read. I knew what they said. Please fear emotional blackmail. The usual. At 11 at night, the silence of the neighborhood broke. It was not the asthmatic engine of Michael's car, but the powerful roar of a black truck, the kind that takes up 2 lanes and has windows as dark as their owners' consciences. It stopped right in front of my gate. My heart skipped a beat. I will not deny it. It is one thing to threaten with papers, and quite another to see the chrome metal of violence parked on your sidewalk. Michael got out of the passenger seat. He looked small next to the truck, shrunken, pointing at my house with a trembling finger. From the driver's side, a man got out. He was not tall, but he was wide like a refrigerator with an unbuttoned shirt revealing gold chains and an attitude of someone who walks over the world without asking permission. Butch Malone, or at least one of his lieutenants. They banged on the metal gate. The metallic sound resonated through the neighborhood, but no one peeked out. In these times, neighbors learn to be deaf to survive. "Open up, mother-in-law," shouted Michael, his voice loaded with borrowed courage, the kind given by alcohol or extreme fear. "We come to negotiate the easy way." I got up slowly. I smoothed my skirt. I took the black notebook and an old manila envelope stained by time that I had taken from my hiding place under the floor that afternoon. I walked to the front door, removed the security deadbolts the locksmith had installed blessed man, and opened the oak door. But I did not remove the exterior security gate. There they were, Michael sweating cold, and the gorilla beside him chewing a toothpick with contempt. "Good evening," I said. My voice did not tremble. I mentally thanked the years of dealing with furious union members in my office. "Lady," said the wide man approaching the gate. He smelled of cheap tobacco and expensive lotion. "Your son-in-law says there is a misunderstanding with a property. He says you do not want to cooperate to pay a debt of honor." "There is no misunderstanding, young man," I answered, looking him in the eye. "My son-in-law is a thief and a scammer, and this house is not bargaining chips for his vices." The man let out a short, dry laugh. "Look, lady, I do not care about your family fights. Michael owes me 50 grand plus interest. He says this house is the collateral. If you do not sign or pay, we collect. And we do not like collecting in kind because it stains the carpets." Michael hid a little behind the man. "Tell her, Butch. Tell her we are not playing. Sign Emily, sign the rights transfer, and we let you live here until, well, we will see." The situation was clear. Michael had brought the wolf to blow down Grandma's house. They expected me to faint, to cry, to hand over the deeds so they would not hurt me. But I did not see a monster. I saw a file. "You are Malone?" I asked, ignoring Michael. "That is what they call me. Son of Al Malone, alias Big Al, who operated in the warehouse district in the 80s. I said the fact with the naturalness of someone reciting a grocery list. The man stopped chewing the toothpick. He narrowed his eyes. "Did you know my boss?" "Not your boss, your dad. And I know File 34B from the year 1988 very well." I held up the manila envelope, showing it through the bars of the gate. "Do you know what is in here?" Butch took a step back, instinctive. The mention of dates and specific names has a curious effect on people who live in the shadows. It reminds them that someone is always watching. "What are you talking about, old lady?" He growled, but his tone had lost the initial arrogance. "I am talking about a lot in St. Mary's, a lot that your father acquired after a very convenient fire in a municipal warehouse. A fire where 2 watchmen died." I paused, letting the words fall like stones. That case was closed for lack of evidence. The official file disappeared. Curious, right? Michael looked from me to the thug, understanding nothing. "Do not listen to her. She is crazy. Go in and get the signature." Butch raised a hand, silencing Michael with a brusque gesture. He stared at me, trying to calculate if I was a senile old lady or a real threat. "That case is dead," muttered the man. "Cases die, papers do not." I smiled a cold smile that did not reach my eyes. When I was director of the archive, I rescued many things that were going to the shredder on orders from above. I have the certified copy of the fire marshal's report that never reached the judge. I have the names of the witnesses your father silenced, and I have something more interesting for you, boy. I moved closer to the gate, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I have the list of the current front men of your organization because it turns out Michael is not the only idiot who leaves paper trails. You use a notary downtown, Mr. Perea's office, right? Perea was my intern 30 years ago. He is a careless man." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the buzzing of insects in the street lamps. Michael was pale, gasping like a fish out of water. Butch looked at me with a mixture of hate and respect, that look given to a viper you just found in your boot. "You are playing with fire, Mrs. Emily," he said, but there was no longer physical threat in his posture, only caution. "I am the fire boy." "You are the firewood," I replied. "Now listen to me well. You are going to take this useless man from my door. Michael's debt is Michael's problem. If you stand on my sidewalk again, or if something happens to my house, that manila envelope arrives tomorrow at the Attorney General's office with a copy to your rivals in the South Cartel. I know they would pay very well to know where you keep your money." The man stood motionless for a few seconds. Then he nodded slowly, just once, a recognition between predators. He turned around and walked toward the truck. "Wait! Butch, where are you going?" shouted Michael, running after him, grabbing his arm. "We had a deal. She has money. We just have to scare her." Butch turned and backhanded Michael with the back of his hand. The sound was dry, brutal. Michael fell to the ground like a sack of potatoes, holding his bleeding mouth. "The deal is over," spat the man. "You did not tell me your mother-in-law held the keys to the cemetery. Figure it out yourself. And I want my money tomorrow at noon, or I will come looking for you. And this time I won't knock." The truck peeled out, burning rubber, and disappeared into the night. Michael lay on the sidewalk, wiping blood from his lip. He looked at me from the ground. There was no longer arrogance in his eyes. There was pure terror. The terror of someone realizing the world is much bigger and more dangerous than his limited mind could conceive. "What? What are you?" he stammered. "I am the woman you stole from," I said, closing the oak door and throwing the bolt with a definitive click. I returned to the empty living room. My hands were trembling a little now that the adrenaline was dropping. But I forced myself to breathe deep. I sat back in my fishing chair. I had not won the war, but I had won a decisive battle. I had proven that my power did not reside in money or physical strength, but in memory, in a country of forgetful people. Whoever remembers has absolute power. 10 minutes passed. I heard soft knocks on the door. They were not demanding knocks. They were timid knocks, almost shameful. "Mom," it was Sarah's voice. "Mom, please, Michael is bleeding. He is very bad. Let us in. We are scared." I walked to the door but did not open. "Michael has a car, Sarah. Let him go to the hospital." "Mom, we have nowhere to go," she sobbed. "The Millers kicked us out of their house when they found out about the fraud. Michael cannot go back to our apartment because Butch's men will be waiting for him. Please, Mom, he is your son-in-law. I am your daughter." I felt a pang in my chest. She was my girl, the same one whose scraped knees I cured. But if I opened that door now, if I allowed them to enter and take refuge under my skirts, they would never learn. Michael would feel safe again and Sarah would go back to being his silent accomplice. Mercy without justice is weakness. "You have an option," I said through the wood. "The warehouse." "What?" asked Sarah, confused. "The warehouse where you have my things. Go there. Spend the night guarding my furniture. Make sure nothing breaks, make sure no humidity gets in. If tomorrow at 8 in the morning my things are not here, then yes, Michael will have to worry about Butch. But if my things return, maybe I can make a call to give you a little more time." There was a long silence. I heard Michael moan in pain and murmur something unintelligible. "Are you sending us to sleep in an industrial warehouse?" asked Sarah, incredulous. "You sent me to sleep in a maid's room next to the garage, daughter. I think a warehouse is a promotion. You have the keys to the moving truck, right? Use them." I heard their steps moving away, slow, dragging feet. Michael's car engine took a while to start, but finally it did and drove away down the street. I was left alone again. But this time the loneliness did not feel empty. It felt clean. I took out my cell phone and dialed Vince's number. "Boss, everything good," he answered on the first ring. "Everything under control, Vince." Butch came to visit me. What his voice sounded alarmed. "Do you want me to go over there?" "I am coming with the boys." "No need. We had a very productive chat about local history. He left calm, but I need a favor for tomorrow morning." "Whatever you say." "Get me a moving crew, the good ones. I want people who know how to handle antiques. My things are going to arrive in a swift transport truck, but I do not trust that Michael and his buddy know how to unload them without breaking them. I want your men to supervise the unloading. And Vince, I want you to record everything." Michael's face, Sarah's. "I want a record of how they return what was stolen." "Understood, Mrs. Emily. You are serious business, huh? I never thought you had a handle on Butch. Everyone has a tail to be stepped on, Vince. The secret is knowing where to put the heel." I hung up. I lay down on the folding chair, covering myself with the shawl. I looked at the high ceiling of my living room, imagining where I would hang the crystal chandelier again. I imagined my books returning to the shelves, like soldiers returning to their posts after a war. But something had fundamentally changed. It was no longer just my house. Now it was my fortress. And I was no longer just the retired widow. Michael, in his infinite stupidity, had woken me up. He had brought out the Emily I myself had archived when I retired. The strategist, the relentless one, the woman who does not need to shout to be heard. The next morning the spectacle was worth seeing. It was 7:30 when the moving truck appeared on the street. Michael was driving with a swollen purple lip and an eye almost shut. Sarah was next to him, pale dark circles under her eyes, with clothes wrinkled from sleeping sitting up. Behind them came Vince's truck with 4 burly men who seemed to know what they were doing. I went out to the porch with my coffee mug in hand, fresh as a daisy, as if I had slept on Goose Down and not on a canvas chair. I opened the electric gate, which fortunately Michael had not managed to disconnect completely, and stood in the center of the driveway directing traffic like a traffic cop. "Careful with that mirror," I ordered when I saw Michael trying to lower my grandmother's gold frame clumsily. "Let go of it. Let Vince's men do it. You do not touch anything valuable. Your hands are dirty." Michael obeyed without a peep. He was defeated. Reality had run over him like a steamroller. He stood next to the truck, head down, while my furniture began to flow back into the house. It was a river of wood and memories returning to its channel. Sarah approached me. She did not try to hug me this time. She stopped 6 feet away, looking at me as if I were a stranger. "How did you do it?" she asked in a low voice. "How did you make Butch leave?" "Michael said that. He said you had information about his father. I have information on everyone, Sarah, even yours." I stared at her. "I know about the times you forged my signature at school when you were a child, and I know you knew about the house sale for a month, not since I went on the cruise. I found the printed emails in the glove compartment of Michael's car when he came to drop off the keys." Sarah looked down, ashamed. "I am sorry, Mom. We had so much pressure. We thought you would not mind, that you would be better without so many responsibilities. They thought I was old and no good." Michael nodded frantically. "Yes, mother-in-law, yes, Emily. Whatever you say, thank you. Thank you for saving my life. Do not get confused," I told him, getting so close I could see the fear in his dilated pupils. "I am not saving your life. I am giving you a longer leash. Starting today, you work for me. You are my debtor, and I am a very demanding creditor." I turned around and entered my house. Vince's men were placing the console in its place. The mirror returned to the wall. The house began to breathe again. Sarah and Michael stayed outside in the sun, looking in as if they were viewing a forbidden temple. They had lost the right to enter as family. Now they would have to earn the right to enter as guests. I sat in my recovered armchair in the middle of the reverse-moving chaos. Dust floated in the light beams. I took out my cell phone and took a photo of the living room with Michael in the background cleaning a table with a rag. I uploaded it to my status with a simple phrase: "Cleaning the house, taking out the trash, and recovering treasures." Never underestimate someone who knows history. The old Emily had died on that cruise. The woman sitting here was new, forged in betrayal and tempered in victory, and she had much, much to do. The house was full again, but the most important thing is that I was full of a power I did not know I had, and that I would never let go of again. I looked at my daughter through the window. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, I did not see pity in her eyes. I saw admiration and a little fear. Good. Fear is useful. Fear keeps things in order. I closed my eyes and smiled. The true transformation was just beginning. The aroma of beef bourguignon filled every corner of the house, impregnating the velvet curtains and mixing with the smell of antique wax that shone again on the wooden floors. It was Sunday, 6 months after that fateful return from the cruise, and the scene in my dining room looked like something out of a home and family magazine, although the foundations of that image were completely different from before. I was sitting at the head of the table in my high-backed chair that my grandkids Louie and Annie had learned not to use because it is Grandma's throne. To my right was Sarah serving rice with nervous dexterity. To my left, Michael. But the Michael of today did not wear his shiny polyester suits or his imitation gold watch. He wore a simple cotton shirt. He had calloused hands and dark circles that told stories of real early mornings. "The roast is delicious, mother-in-law," said Michael in a low voice, without looking up much from the plate. "Thank you, Michael. The secret is to sear the meat well and have patience," I replied, taking a sip of my iced tea. Patience is something one learns right, sometimes the hard way, but it is learned. He nodded, swallowing with difficulty. Since I intervened, his life had taken a 180-degree turn. He was no longer the empty briefcase businessman. Now he worked as an inventory manager at a construction supply warehouse owned by an acquaintance of mine from the city council. An honest job, physical lifting cement bags and counting rebar under the sun. He earned a fraction of what he used to scam, but it was clean money. And most importantly, every Friday without fail, he handed me 30% of his salary to pay the debt to the Millers, whom I managed to convince to accept a payment plan in exchange for not prosecuting him criminally. "Here is this week's Emily," he said, taking a white envelope out of his pants pocket. When we finished eating, he slid it across the embroidered tablecloth to my spot. I did not open it. No need. I knew the amount was exact. Michael had learned to fear my black notebook more than the devil himself. Very well. Mark it in the ledger before you go, I indicated, pointing to the desk in the corner. And Michael the foreman told me you have arrived early all week. Keep it up. Dignity is recovered, boy, but it is recovered sweating. Sarah looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. My daughter had also changed. She was no longer her husband's silent shadow. When everything exploded when she saw her husband crying on the floor and her mother facing a criminal, something broke in her. But it was a necessary break, like the shell that breaks so the chick can be born. Now she took management classes in the afternoons and had started selling desserts by order, small steps toward her own independence. Mom said Sarah serving me a little more water. Mrs. Gertrude, the one from the blue house on the corner, asked if you could receive her tomorrow. She says her nephew wants to make her sign some donation papers while living, and she does not understand the fine print. I smiled. That was my new reality. The news of how the archivist had recovered her house and straightened out a scammer son-in-law, and a local thug had run like gunpowder through the neighborhood. Suddenly, I was no longer just the widow living alone in the big brownstone. I had become a sort of oracle, an unofficial defender of the neighborhood gray hairs. Tell her to come at 10, I replied, wiping the corners of my lips with the napkin, and have her bring her glasses and the original documents. No copies. When we finished eating, Michael and Sarah cleared the table. Before I would have gotten up to do it so as not to bother assuming that role of invisible servitude that many grandmothers adopt. Not anymore. I stayed in my seat, observing how my son-in-law washed the dishes with a diligence he never had for business. It was a tough lesson, yes, but necessary. He was paying his financial debt, but he was also paying his moral debt. He was learning that this house was not a hotel or a bank. It was a sanctuary that is respected. Later, when they left, because now they lived in a small rented apartment they could afford with their real salaries, I went to my office. The afternoon sun entered through the bay window, illuminating my shelves full again. Every book was in its place, classified by subject and author just as I liked. But now, in the center of the mahogany table, there were piles of files that were not mine. I sat down and took the first one. It was the case of Mr. Anselmo, a retired railroad worker whom the bank wanted to strip of his pension for a debt that was not his. Next to it, the case of Mrs. Piedad, whose daughter-in-law hid her medicines to control her. I opened my black notebook. It no longer only had Michael's accounts. Now it had names, dates, laws, and contacts. I had reactivated my network of old colleagues, honest notaries, young lawyers wanting to fight. And yes, I even maintained a respectful line of communication with people like Vince for when legal justice was too slow and logistical persuasion was needed. My house had transformed. It ceased to be the mausoleum of memories of Robert and me to become a headquarters. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, my living room received my clients. I did not charge them money. I charged them in stories. I asked them to tell me about the old neighborhood, about their lives. I was building a new archive, a living one of our community's memory. I heard the doorbell. I adjusted my glasses and went to open. It was the mailman, a young boy who always looked at me with a little fear. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Emily. This arrived from the Department of Culture." I signed for receipt and opened the envelope right there under the lintel of my recovered oak door. It was an official letter. They invited me to give a conference on the importance of document management in the protection of family heritage. I laughed softly. If they knew that my document management included threatening a local boss with files from the 80s. I closed the door and walked toward the living room. I stopped in front of my grandmother's gold-framed mirror. I looked at myself. The wrinkles were still there, marking the map of my 72 years. The skin on my neck was loose, and my hands had sunspots. But my eyes shone with an intensity they hadn't had since I was 30. For a long time, I believed retirement was the final act. They sell us the idea that after 65, our job is to sit knit and wait for death without making noise. They tell us we are fragile, that we do not understand technology, that the modern world is too big for us. And we fools believe it. We cede control. We sign powers of attorney. We let them treat us like children. Michael did me a favor, actually. His betrayal was the electric shock I needed to wake up. By trying to take everything from me, he forced me to remember who I am. I am not the little grandma. I am Emily Clark. I am a woman who knows where the truth is kept and how to use it. I walked toward the window overlooking the street. I saw an elderly couple pass by, walking slowly, arm in arm. They looked vulnerable. I thought about how many predators are out there, waiting for a moment of weakness, an oversight, a hurried signature. Not while I am here, I murmured to myself. My cell phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. I took it out. It was a message from Butch. Yes, we maintained a strange truce. Lady, letting you know some guys are asking about old folks' lands in the North Zone. They say they are from a new real estate agency. Stay sharp. I smiled. Butch knew I was a better alarm system than the police. I replied with a simple emoji of an open eye. I sat in my green velvet armchair, the one Michael had dragged back with his own hands. I took a sip of my coffee, which now tasted of glory, of victory, of peace. The transformation was complete. I had not become a bitter woman. On the contrary, I felt an immense fullness. I had recovered my relationship with my daughter, not from pity, but from respect. She came now to ask me for advice, not money, and my grandkids. My grandkids looked at me as if I were a secret superhero. The other day, Louis asked me, "Grandma, is it true you scared the bad guys?" I winked at him and gave him a cookie. It is good that new generations know that grandmas bite. I looked around my living room. There were no longer holes in the walls, but the space felt different. It was full of purpose. Robert, my late husband, used to say that a house is not the bricks, but the character of who inhabits it. How right he was. They had tried to empty my house, but they ran into the fact that the foundations were made of pure iron. Tomorrow, Mrs. Gertrude would come with her papers. The day after tomorrow, I had to review a neighbor's lease agreement. And on Friday, I would go to the salon to get a manicure and get my hair done, because a general also has to look good to review the troops. Old age is not the end of the book. It is simply the chapter where the plot gets more interesting because the protagonist no longer has anything to lose and has all the experience to gain. They had underestimated me, and that was their fatal error. Now I was the guardian of this fortress and of many others. I got up and went to the antique record player that I had also recovered from the warehouse. I put on a vinyl of ballads, the kind Robert liked. The music filled the air soft and romantic. "Cheers, old man," I toasted to the air with my coffee mug. The house is in order. And I am just getting started. I stayed there dancing alone, a slow step in the middle of my living room, feeling the delicious weight of my own history under my feet. Outside, the world kept turning with its rushes and its modernities. But inside here, time danced to my rhythm. And anyone who wanted to enter to change the music would have to think twice, because now everyone knew that in this house does not live a helpless little old lady. Here lives the owner, the lady, the archivist, and I never close a file until justice has been done.